Hello. Welcome. We're going to get started in just a few minutes, but I am Jennifer Dominic of Love Life Images, and I am so excited that you're here today to join us. Hope everybody is enjoying this amazing day. I was just telling Jamie that we just had a little family of foxes come through our backyard. So they're so cute. They're so cute. Playing and goofing around and all of that. So yeah, great. I'm so glad to have all these.
Thanks for hosting this. And I'm a wreck, so that's why my video is not on.
Okay.
I've got babies and everybody else, so
no worries. No worries. No worries. I understand. There's some days where I just don't do my hair and makeup, and I'm like, okay, this is not a Zoom day, so not a video day for Zoom. But I did my hair and makeup for you guys, so
you look great.
Thank you. All right, maybe just another minute more to see. I really am excited about talking about these things with everyone today. And we had quite a few people register, so hopefully we can get a good discussion going here. All right. Okay. I guess we'll get started. So again, welcome. Thank you everyone for being here. I'm Jennifer Dominic of Love Life Images. And last week I hosted a panel discussion about from some of our Black colleagues who shared their experiences with racism in the wedding industry. And I thought it was really enlightening. I had a lot of great feedback from it. And I was really grateful for everyone that showed up for that. Towards the end of the conversation, there really was a lot of focus and attention on what are we going to do about this? How can we change this? What can we do? What can we do differently? And I've been thinking a lot about this past week and sort of looking into different ways that other people, or different examples that other people have given on how they've tackled it, and I just wanted to share that example. I have one really good example, but I also want to hear from you all. I want to hear, what your thoughts are, if if anything has changed for you all over the last week, if there's anything you want to share, if there's anything that you have seen that could be really helpful for us. So I'm going to share my screen real quickly. One moment, please. One moment. Okay. There we go. Okay, so actionable steps. I don't know how many people have kind of gone into this stage of dealing with addressing racism in your own businesses, but this is kind of the next thing. And one of the examples that stood out to me the most was something that Occasion Caterers posted this past week on their Instagram stories. And I thought it was just a really good example of what some of the things are that you can do as a business. So these are some of the posts that they made, and I'll just read a couple of them off to you. While we have embraced diversity among our staff, we do not have enough Black voices at occasions, period. Action is required now, and here's where we're starting. Increased representation of Black employees at all levels and in all areas of the company. Create a diversity advisory group made up of employees from all parts of the company to help guide leadership and help us on a mission. I love that, a diversity advisory group. I wonder, how many are just small businesses with its maybe just, one owner, one employee, or maybe some are larger businesses that are joining today. This would be helpful, but that would be, maybe just something if you are a larger business. So host a staff town hall to openly address racial inequalities and ways to combat them. I think a big part of doing this kind of work is recognizing when there are the racial inequalities and addressing them. That's one of the, I think, biggest ways that we can all do some work in this area. So actively support more local Black-owned businesses and vendors in the event industry. I say bravo to that. Do you guys have any thoughts on this? Any feedback? What are you all thinking? Everyone's very quiet. No. Go ahead. Sorry, somebody was going to say something.
I was going to jump in. I don't know if someone else was. I'm Laura. I work at the Peabody Library and the Evergreen Museum, directing the private events program. We have taken a lot of time over the past, I guess, 2 weeks, 3 weeks now, to sit and think about. I mean, luckily we have the time since we have no events right now, to, as a team, really think about this. We don't know exactly what we're doing yet, but I think like late last year, it occurred to me that every vendor on our preferred vendor list, which are recommendations, not required, I think, except for one jazz pianist, they were all white. Some companies were larger and had like multiple photographers, but it was a pretty jarring to actually look through the list and think about that. We added a few, we looked through and added a few vendors of color, and then sort of got busy and didn't do anything else about that. And this has brought that back to the surface for us. And one of the things that I've really realized is, yes, we want to diversify our list, but we also realized that the criteria and how we added people to the list was becoming this sort of self-fulfilling circle of whiteness. We were trying to be fair, and we don't let anyone pay to be on the list or anything like that. So it was all based on who had worked at our venue, 3 to 4 times. We had good feedback from, but we realized that we need to rethink that because we were just letting the same people basically circle through the list. I don't know exactly how we're going to change that, but we're starting to think about that now.
That's great. Yeah. I think the lists, I think in particular, tend to really kind of show, who, that can reveal a lot about, and it's like, maybe you're not thinking about it, but then when you have the minute to step back and really think about it, you're like, wow, holy smokes. Like, it's surprising,
I think too, Laura, this is Rebecca O'Donnell. I think I just realized my video is not on, sorry. What you're saying is, especially when you come into like a venue or something, a lot of those people predated you, I'm assuming. And that's the problem with all of us is like, when I first became a planner, I worked with vendors that the people that I worked for worked with, and they were mostly white. And so then it just sort of perpetuates, if you work with all white vendors, then that's who you're going to keep referring. And so I think it's important to reach out to to planners that you like, as a planner, to reach out to planners that you respect and specifically say, who are some, Black florists, who are some LGBTQ photographers, who are some, caterers of color, things like that, and not just, oh, we have a Black chef, but like actually in leadership positions in the company, to reach out to other people in the industry that we respect and truly work on diversifying our recommendation list and not just be like, oh, I only refer people that I've worked with. Well, if that's what, I think that's how we've all operated. That's certainly how I've always operated. I'm like, I only recommend people that I work with or people that I know that have gotten to know well through networking things. And that's, how this country has worked for
Mhm.
200 and however many years. It's like,
Yeah.
if you keep recommending the people that you work with and the people that you work with are white, then that's how we got a bunch of old white dudes running everything,
Right.
And it seems, listening to some of these webinars and trying to learn over the past few weeks, there's like kind of I want to hit myself in the head and say, okay, well, instead of asking all of our white vendor friends to do a styled shoot, we should reach out and find some other people so that we have worked with them. There's like some very, to me, that's a very, unfortunately, we can't open right now, but when we can, trying to figure out who we can reach out to design a shoot who we've never worked with before, but we could use that as sort of a test to get to know them. Seems like a very easy first step, instead of reaching out to the same photographers who we still love and who've worked at our properties and we've recommended for years, but giving more, you just finding a Black planner like Tiffany or someone else and asking them to come into the space and design a shoot for us, instead of just the same people.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. I think that's a real easy and straightforward way of, kind of creating more inclusion. So, okay, let me go on. So Occasion Caterers, this is again their Instagram, and this is what they posted. These are the several things that they posted as actionable steps. Effective immediately, every team member will take anti-bias and inclusivity training to help strengthen our corporate values and improve our recruiting, hiring, development, and community impact. I am wondering what anti-bias and inclusivity training there is out there. If anyone knows of any, if you could put it in the chat, that would be super helpful. I saw a couple posts, and there have been a few people who've stepped out and sort of given webinars in the industry, but I think this is interesting to, on a smaller level for just your business, like what anti-bias and can't say it, and inclusivity training means. So let's see, make meaningful contributions and provide in-kind catering support to local organizations who fight to eradicate racial injustice, including but not limited to Black Student Fund and Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law. I love that, right? Tackling food insecurity in our city's Black communities and expanding our Giving Kitchen program, providing meals to those most vulnerable. That's great too. This must change, and we promise to continue to do our part. These steps will help us forge a new path towards a more just, equitable, and inclusive work community. Thank you for holding us accountable. So I thought this was really, a good step in the right direction. I love that they, recognized that it was a problem, and then they realized that they needed to make some change. So any thoughts, feedback, input, feelings on this? Does it seem like, go ahead.
I have something to say. That's okay.
Yeah, go for it, please.
So this is Dory from Hoopla Catering, the food market and Food Marketta. Jennifer, can we go back to the regular screen for a second so I could just see?
Yeah, sure, of course.
I am going to throw something out there that may be a little controversial, but I think, sometimes those things are important to talk about. I'm originally from New York. Obviously, I've been in Baltimore for some time now, and something that I noticed immediately in Baltimore is that Baltimore feels very segregated in a lot of ways, not just Black, white. And in our industry, I still think our industry is a representation of what Greater Baltimore looks like, and it feels segregated. When Hoopla Catering launched, we were catering under the food market for a while, but when we launched our catering arm on its own, one of the first things that you need to do is make connections, meet people, gain access to venues. And I think that step alone is really difficult. I think Laura alluded to it, and we weren't, welcomed with open arms a lot of places. And that has nothing to do necessarily with, you know, whether we're white or black, but I think it's a systemic problem that if you've been known for years, you know, like the people, you keep referring to the same people, you keep referring to the same people, that's a reflection of what we're seeing now with race. And I think that as a event industry, we need to be more inclusive and open to lots of different kind of people, and very much so the Black community. It's not just referrals of who you know, it's, you know, referrals of maybe somebody else that knows somebody that you've connected with. And last week on the call, there was something that one of the panelists said about networking that, you know, I found networking also to be very segregated. The people that know each other stick with each other. The people that don't know each other are walking around. No one steps over that line to say, hey, you know, I've never met you before. Let's chat. And someone alluded to that last week. She said, make that initial connection. And I think that goes for all of us in all different spaces. And, you know, like I've met a lot of people over the past couple of weeks through networking like this. And I really hope that continues when we're in real spaces. And people are just more open and willing to have a conversation with somebody that you don't know. And so I know that, you know, that's maybe something to throw out there that we're not all ready to swallow, but I think it starts with venues, who you're letting through your doors, and also who you're recommending and who you're networking with. So I just want to throw that out there. I mean, I think what Occasions is doing is great. They're probably a bigger company that can do a lot of that. We're a bit smaller, so we don't have that kind of staff to do a lot of that training with. We immediately, you know, made donations as a company and as individuals, and have done, you know, we've discussed things amongst ourselves, but there's a lot of work to be done. There's a lot I don't know about. There's a lot of things I need to work through, you know, both professionally, personally, and as a company. So I'm just wanted to throw that out there because that's something that really struck me, both, you know, as newer to the field, and then last week from the discussion that we had, which was really, really powerful. So,
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, okay, here's something that I've been thinking about. Again, controversial, but it's really been eating away at me, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. So, you know, oftentimes when you're a creative person or an artist, people will come to you for a certain aesthetic and a certain style. And I think there are planners that align themselves with certain photographers and or florists and or, you know, other vendors who are kind of presenting an aesthetic and a style. And I guess I'm just wondering, you know, how can we not combat that? Because I mean, I understand what they're trying to do in terms of like, if you go to this planner, this is the kind of wedding that you're going to get. Or if you go to this photographer, this is the kind of, you know, photography, and that aligns with a certain type of wedding that you're going to get. But I guess one of the things that occurred to me was, you know, if what we're seeing, what the publications and what you know, we're looking at the blogs and Instagram and things that we are holding up as, you know, really beautiful, are not including kind of a diverse like look or feel to them, then we get pigeonholed into a certain way of sort of seeing things. And I think that ties into kind of this bigger thought of like, you know, what's beautiful and, you know, what are we drawn to? And I think as a society, and sorry, I'm getting super philosophical, but I think as a society, you know, changing our ideas of what is beautiful comes into play with that. So, but I understand, you know, if you're going for a certain aesthetic, you know, how do you break free from that. And I don't know if anyone has thoughts on that.
Hello, everybody. So this is Tiffany with Bird of Paradise Events. I'm not sure who's on here. I'm so sorry because I am in the car and, I'm on this mobile Zoom, so you can't see everybody's faces at once. But I have been on for a while. And I wanted to, so two words came to mind, I believe, when Laura spoke from the Peabody, and then when Dory just gave her comment. And the two words that really resonate in reference to Dory is effort, and in reference to Laura with Peabody is research. So to start with Dory is, I wholeheartedly agree in reference to the separation and segregation surrounding the industry and networking events and being places and things like that. And to kind of address it, it's going to take effort moving forward. And it's going to take the effort of being outside of your comfort zone, to be in a place where you don't know, someone, or you don't, the truth of the matter is, even being in a environment, a public place, or networking, you don't even know what they do. But it's going to take the effort of you going up and saying, hello, I'm Dory of, Hoopla Catering. What do you do? And actually getting to know that person, So the problem with all of this is that we're only visibly seeing, we're not getting to know people and what they're doing and what their business is and how great their brand may be, or it might not be, but we're so separated that we don't, put forth the effort to kind of find out. So Dory, I wholeheartedly agree, but that's what it's going to take. It's going to take the effort. So once, we go back to some sort of normalcy and we're in, places and gatherings and networking events, that we're actually, making the effort to get to know, different Black vendors, different, Black brands, businesses, introducing ourselves, things like that. In reference to the Peabody, I'm so glad that Laura kind of brought up the, fact that they were, looking at their list and things like that. But Laura, to kind of speak to the types of venues that we have in Baltimore, all Black vendors can't work at the Peabody, and that's where it takes research on, the different brands, to find out, to get quality, Black businesses and Black vendors, you know what I mean? Not just to throw, people on your list just because we're just putting people of color on the list. And this, and to me, this is the perfect time to kind of research vendors, look at their websites, reach out to them, see if you can do a mini interview, and, get to know them and things like that. It's all about research. But Baltimore wedding industry has been in the air quotes of, who's the biggest brand, or who's the branding queen or king, you know what I mean? Baltimore has always operated that way, and they've always been white. And with that, brings no diversity, because those types of vendors bring the same vendors, their same, they don't reach out for diversity. They don't reach out for, as Jennifer was mentioning, different aesthetics. They don't reach out for, those types of things. So I think and I know Dory, we just got connected during these Zoom calls, so it's all about the research and what's going to, fit your venue, and who's going to fit your venue, who's going to be good for your venue. So while it's, the action steps are, okay, we're going to add some, people of color to our recommendation list. We're going to add some vendors, but you just can't add anybody. And it has to be, the same way things have to fit your brand, it has to fit, with your business.
Yeah. I mean, like, again, I fully agree with you, Tiffany. It's Dory again. But just to piggyback on that, I think that some of this work will start with the venues, because the venues are the part of the industry that's often deciding who's allowed in and who's allowed not in. And I have to tell you, as you know, when I came on and started really pushing Hoopla as its own, leg of the company, that's where I found the biggest roadblocks was who's letting you in and who's not, and why are they and why aren't they? And, we kind of said, you know what, if people aren't going to even give us a chance, like, you know what, we won't work there. And if they come to us in a couple of years because we're blowing up, we're going to reconsider how they treated us when we started, and how they treated our staff. I mean, there was a venue that we pulled from very quickly because they did not treat our staff in a way that we felt good about. And Laura, I know you said that it doesn't cost to come onto your list, but I think some of these venues need to look at that too. Does it cost to come on? And then also, what does it cost if you do work there? So it may not cost to gain access to your list, but what kind of charges are you charging, your vendors if they do have an event there? That's another barrier for people. I mean, sometimes people need to walk away because certain venues are taking, a chunk of their costs and they can't stay above water because of that. So I think, again, going back to looking at the whole system, what are we doing to welcome people? And like Tiffany said, it's important to vet people, but looking at it from there too is important.
And I definitely hear you, Dory. And I want to clarify so we do have a exclusive catering list, which is a completely different model than our other list, which is recommended vendors of all other types. So there is more of a financial and full contractual multi-year agreement with caterers. So yes, but that is something, and again, I don't know the answer quite yet, because this is, it's a large part of how our program is built, relies on our catering, sort of the way that our catering works. We have wanted to, in a kind of, for lack of a better word, half-assed way, sort of, but we'd love to have a Black-owned caterer on our list. When we've done RFPs, we've reached out to some, and they have declined to bid. So yes, obviously something we're doing is not opening that up to other to companies that, whether it's financial, whether it's contractual. That's a bigger challenge for us, and will take a lot more time for us to kind of rethink that as a system and figure out what will work. One thing that I've also noticed in Baltimore, and I don't want to sound like I'm putting anyone down, but there's in many ways, I think, a financial disparity between, there is between the white and the Black community in many ways. But looking at trying to find Black-owned caterers has been a difficulty for us, that are sort of fitting with all of the rules that we've put in place and things that we're looking for in a caterer. I'm thrilled and excited to learn about Get Plated from DC. We do have a client who's using them as an exception coming up. So we're excited to get to know them better. But yeah, there's a lot we need to figure out there and think about the full system, which won't happen overnight, but we're going to start thinking about.
This is Anna. I'm not really familiar with the Baltimore market, so I work at the Carnegie Institution for Science in DC. So I'm a venue manager, and I do want to kind of chime into this, and something that from the last call that really struck me as a positive message was Kawanya saying about being transparent. I'll be honest, full transparency, I have not in the past, if I had a poor showing from a caterer or any vendor, if I've had difficulties, I've been very reluctant to be direct as to what the issues were. And I think it's mutual, but for me, a lot of times it's like, you know what, like, this is it. I mean, certain, if it's egregious enough, I've been transparent, being like, hey, you're no longer welcome here. But as opposed to someone being in there and then just being like, you know what, I'm just not going to recommend them without giving that feedback. And I think that's really something I'm cognizant about now and really going forward, try to be better. And I appreciate that advice. With caterers, what it is, the issue, and I can kind of, Laura can maybe chime in on this, it is extremely difficult for a historic building. And I think a lot of our decisions are based on previous managers, like this, how it's been instituted, who's allowed to work, who's not. And also one bad experience does mess up the system. So it is a lot for, at least for us, we rely heavily on caterers to do a lot. So in terms of cleaning, setup, furniture, like mopping. So when we do go through this process of allowing someone new, and we're very flexible. So up until 2 years. So when we started being very strict and limiting it to, let's say, 7, 8 caterers. So we would go to other caterers like Peabody and say, if someone worked there before, say, hey, you worked with this caterer, can we do a reference check? Because we want to know, it doesn't matter, we don't care about the food. I'll be honest, who cares? You can have the best food, don't care. If you don't clean up, you don't move in on time, you don't move out on time, then I'm stuck at home, stuck at work till like 2 a.m. mopping the floors. So it is a lot of that, but I think a part of it, like if we do give a chance to someone, it is really on me to give that feedback, that constructive feedback, as painful as it might be. And it could be like, you know what, you're not staffing this event the way that I think you need to for this facility. And even though it sounds, I hate to say it, like it could be sort of like, you need to do it like occasions does, or you need to, without it being like you need to be occasions, but like these are some tools or methods what other caterers do to be successful. But I mean, we do need to be more open. And in terms of vendors, I'm happy to say, like, we work with so many wonderful minority-owned, Black-owned businesses, and they're not on our list. Guilty, completely guilty. And it wasn't until the last 2 weeks where I just had a moment, I was like, I wanted to look at our website, but I knew that there were vendors that I love that I never even thought to put on there. And so, I mean, I'm happy to share with people. We've updated a list, and I want that to be growing and evolving. So working with venues, because I think venues have this gatekeeper mentality, sort of like who's going to be in, who's going to be out. But I do appreciate the perspective from a venue, because it's one thing for us to recommend something that like what a client loves, but what works for us as a facility. So
Yeah.
that's my 2 cents.
Yeah.
Hey, it's Alicia. I just wanted to jump in real quick. Sorry, this is Alicia Crosby. I'm director of events at the Baltimore Museum of Art. So Laura and I, you know, we work very closely together. We're both museums and historic properties, and it is trickier. You know, every venue is different. We're not created equally, and we all have our own parameters of the list and fees, or you know, fee structure or not. I will say, working in a museum, it is a different beast. It's very, very difficult to find really, really good caterers, white owned, Black owned, female owned, it doesn't matter, just caterers. It's difficult to really find a core great company that has great staff, that is always respectful and always aware that they're in a museum. Because, you know, the day of an event, it's a bunch of different vendors, you know, rushing around trying to make it happen, and they all have you know, their job on their mind. 100% correct. But just the caterers that are on our list are always respectful of our space, and most importantly, always aware of where they are, that they're standing next to a 7th century mosaic, you know, Antioch mosaic, or that they're standing next to a sculpture. I mean, I've seen catering staff work like as our security officers. You know, if somebody gets too close to a sculpture and our security officer isn't there, they're just jumping right in, and you know, as they're walking hors d'oeuvres around or something, they're like, oh, you're too close. So so we've really built those relationships. Having said that, I'm always open to exploring new catering partnerships, and we sort of, the way we bring them in is you know, they do have to have a Maryland SCAT license, you know, and not every caterer does. So I mean, right there, that'll kind of knock a few off the list, but they do have to have a statewide liquor catering license. They have to have been in business, you know, for at least a few years. I do reach out to other venues that I know that are similar to us and ask for references, etc. But then they kind of start with our internal events, you know, like our member event or a board event or something like that, so that it's not a client, a wedding or a corporate or a client with a lot of money on the line that is relying on this caterer. And I'm honestly doing this for the caterer's benefit, who's never worked in our space and truly doesn't understand what goes into working in our space, because we don't have a kitchen. We have a, you know, tiny prep area. We don't have tables, you know, there's a lot that goes into it. So I do train, I do communicate, I do vet. And to Anna's comment, I do, if somebody, I'm an extremely direct person. People who know me know that. If somebody does an amazing job, I am the first to tell them. And if somebody doesn't, I am the first to give constructive criticism. And there have been situations with caterers, with other vendors, where something very egregious has happened. And I've reached out and I've told them. And if they were extremely defensive, they were immediately just off the list. It's like, you know, you're not allowed to work in here. But if they were understanding and wanted to work together towards a change, then I give them another chance. So I don't immediately dismiss stuff, but it is a trust issue. With museums, it's very tricky. But if you're not on our list as a caterer, because that's the only thing that you have to use, then I am open to working with other caterers. They just really have to be fully trained, communicate clearly, and sort of, you know, tryouts on some of our internal, and by internal events, I mean, that could be a member event for 1,500 people, you know, so I'm not saying, you know, a 10-person dinner. I mean, like, it can be a huge event. It's just not with my clients who might experience additional costs, because it does cost a lot more to rent a space like ours all around.
So I think what I'm hearing from some of the venues is that there is a set of rules and standards that are in place and requirements that are in place for caterers and certainly other vendors that make it important to be a part, to be accepted as a vendor. I guess for the venues and for all of us, it's really important to maybe like clarify for yourselves, you know, this is something that is like just an expectation, but we can remove from that any racial bias in that. So maybe kind of look at those different, you know, qualifiers and just determine, you know, where is there wiggle room in terms of, you know, could this be a barrier for someone who is a minority or a person of color? And how can we recognize that and maybe even change it, but not, you know, lower our standards, because we still have, you know, certainly a level of requirement that is a base requirement. So
thank you, Jennifer. Sorry to interrupt you. I just want to I really appreciate you saying that. And I want to also mention something that was really important from another call, DC Wedding Week hosted with Alex from Get Plated. And something she said really stuck with me, and it made me cringe, because there's a part of me that wanted to be defensive, but also slightly cry, because she said that she felt as the new caterer as of 2016, walking into venues as if she's going through these loops and having to justify that she's a good caterer, she has a legitimate business, and being made feel like she has to provide all this information where she might not feel that other caterers would have to. And there's this part of me that I really wanted to be like, no, that's not true. Everyone has to go through it, but who am I? And then I took a step back. Perception goes a long way. So it is one of those things, who am I to say that, for her growing up and for every decision she's ever made, that she didn't have to justify something, and that this was another layer of her going through a process. And it really hurt me more, internally hurt. I was embarrassed. I was really embarrassed. And I think it's a big lesson for me, is for any new vendor, small, it's difficult industry to get into, but really to be patient and to kind of be open and just welcoming and explain everything without it sounding condescending, or sort of go with that list of you need to do this in order to meet my requirements. As much as I think I don't do that, I am 100% guaranteed that at least a few people have come across the venue I might have made them feel that way. So I don't want to discount anyone's feelings, and I think we all need to be better and open to that. So just want to say that.
That's awesome. Do you guys mind if I hop in real quick?
Yeah, go for it. Go for it.
I'm Kate Burke with Kate Fine Art Photography. So I'm small potatoes, but thank you guys for doing this and for everyone sharing, being honest. So I have to think, like, get plated's been mentioned a bunch. So I'm thinking what I can do personally, because otherwise it gets really overwhelming as to what difference I can make in this big world. So I'm doing a socially distanced happy hour Thursday, June 25th at Wildberry Farm. So it's open, and Get Plated's going to be there, and in Annapolis, and Kickback Cakes, and Savage Craft and Letter. It's a wife and wife team. So I'll post the info so everyone can come, and it's an opportunity to meet everybody in person. And also, as far as like the referrals, like one of my 2021 brides asked for florists, and after hearing Tiffany and DC Wedding Week and this collective, I almost rattled off the same 5 white florists that I always use, and I paused and included 40% of florists, people of color who are super talented and have such a beautiful aesthetic. One does these beautiful paper flower installations, and my client is going with one of them because it fit her style even more. So again, I'm very humbled and grateful for this. So thanks for letting me share.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so moving along, because I don't want to keep everyone, I find that once you get into really long Zoom, I mean, these are important discussions, so I don't want to cut anyone off either, but really long Zooms can be like exhausting. So what can we do? I really want to hear from you guys. What are some things that you are thinking about that you could do? I mean, obviously, some of the things that we've talked about have been really concrete things to be thinking about. But speaking up when you see something wrong. So there have been a couple of situations where I have spoken up when I saw something that didn't fit with what I was expecting in a situation, and it was not well received. There have been a couple of times I've spoken up, to a couple people about a few things, and some people come back and they're like, oh my gosh, thank you so much, I'm so glad that you said something. And I say it in like the nicest, most like approachable way, but most people are agreeable to it and will listen to what I'm saying and say, thank you, I'm so sorry, I didn't even understand that I was doing that, it wasn't even clear to me. And then in other circumstances, I've spoken up and it's not gone as well as I expected, not well received, not something that I expected. Has anyone else had that experience? Is there anything that you have seen that you have spoken up about?
My name is Daniela. I missed the first 10 minutes, but I figured I'd jump on because I wanted to hop on to what was said before. One of the things is I think that we really need to listen to our Black small business owners and people of color, just try to be very in tune as to what they're saying, because we all need to be very introspective in our own businesses and figure out how we have contributed to these white supremacist systems and how we can hold people accountable. So I shared a link on there. It's just one of many things that we as wedding industry professionals can do. And it's just to sign up a pledge. It's called the Step Up Pledge that Jordan from Love All the Days started. It's about holding our wedding media accountable. But I mean, if you have a personal connection with a wedding magazine that you've been published in, it's like something that you could just email them and be like, hey, are you guys listening? What are your anti-racist steps that you're taking? And because Dory mentioned something about how, really wedding venues are the ones that seem to have like the power in sharing all these different vendor recommendations. And while I can agree that that is true, we also as wedding vendors have the power to reach out to wedding venues and say, hey, what steps are you taking? What anti-racist steps are you taking? I want to know what you're doing in order to diversify your vendor listing. Because what you said, I think early on, is very true. Like, we in this wedding industry, It's a whitewashed wedding industry. This is not news. It's a fat phobic industry. This is not news. This is like a cis heteronormative wedding industry. This is not news. So anyone who falls into that other category is either erased, invisible, not seen. And we as wedding vendors have the responsibility to make sure that these couples are seen, that their stories are told. So for wedding venues, right, like what's something that you can do? You could start a mentorship program. You could say like, hey, we want to reach out to communities of color. We want to reach out to Black communities, and we want, this is how you work in our industry, and we will help you with whatever legal stuff or whatever the venues need. Or, you know, someone else mentioned about like museums and like all the tidbits that need to be involved because, you know, precious art, which is all understandable, but these are things that can be learned and they can be taught. And if we all want to be as inclusive as possible, we can't just, you know, get stuck in this is challenging and this is difficult, because yes, anti-racism work is challenging and it is difficult and it's going to be a lifelong challenge. So we could just stay in like our comfort zone and do like, you know, baby steps here and there, but we could also empower ourselves to do more. And that does mean like reaching out to these venues and saying like, hey, I'd love to know what you want to do, what you're doing. Can I help you in achieving like any of these anti-racist steps? Or the same thing with wedding venues, with wedding media, with photographers, with wedding officiants, which is what I do. In every spectrum of the wedding industry, we need to hold each other accountable. Like this isn't just going to happen in one day, in like one moment. This is continuous work, and we all have to figure it out together. And so like these conversations are important, but I don't want us to get stuck in like, this is challenging because X, Y, and Z, because it's all challenging. It's really challenging for the Black community. And, you know, I'm glad we're like waking up as an industry, like, because more of these conversations are happening, but we need to stay awake, because we can't go back to sleep after this. It's not the time to just like rest.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with you. And I think that that's what today is about. It's really about figuring out what those steps are and how we can work towards doing the work that needs to be done. You know, that's what's really important about today. Let me just share my screen one more time because I want to get back to these topics that we can discuss. So speaking up when you're seeing something wrong, of course, making a donation to an organization that supports racial.
Jen, I'm so sorry to interrupt you.
That's okay.
Just focusing on the speaking up when you see something wrong, I would love to expand on that some more.
Sure, yeah.
If you don't mind, just because I think it's so important. You have in your comments, like, what are the consequences? Frankly, pardon my language, but F the consequences at this point, because if what you're doing is speaking up and saying, you know, hey, maybe let's rethink the way that you're saying that, all the way up to, hey, you're being a racist jerk and I will not work with you anymore, and this is why. You know, if there are consequences, yes, you know, we don't want to destroy an entire business, but frankly, if your consequence for calling out a racist is losing their business, is it business that you wanted in the first place? And so I think it's really important to put it on us, you know, white people, for us to go and say, hey, don't speak to her like that. Hey, don't make comments about, and let's be honest. I have said in the past that Indian weddings are a pain because they're 3 days and I'm exhausted. But when you make comments like that, or Jewish weddings are a pain, or Chinese weddings, or whatever it is, you're stereotyping an entire race of people. And, you know, everybody's like, oh yeah, this type of person I won't work with, and this type of person I won't deal with. You know, we have to challenge all of that behavior. But more, to me, what's most important is the constant microaggressions that Black vendors get, sometimes macroaggressions, frankly. But I see it so much, especially among, that servers are treated so poorly by venue staff a lot of times, and by other vendors and things like that. And it's so infuriating, and I hope that it's infuriating to everybody on this chat. And I think that, the people that are on this chat hopefully wouldn't be here if it wasn't important to them. And so I think it's important for all of us to discuss like other ways that we can call out behaviors in as nice a way as possible. But frankly, I don't know. I'm past being nice at this point in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Well,
and I'd love to hear from other vendors, how are some ways for us to call things out, and what are some ways, especially from our fellow Black vendors, what are ways that you would find helpful, and frankly, what are ways that you would find less helpful, because we also don't want to be like calling somebody out in the middle of a wedding in front of guests. Obviously that is not helpful. And so, we want to do what's most helpful, not things that are hurtful.
I'm just going to say, adding to Rebecca, thank you for saying that, like, it's actually safer for you as white wedding vendors to say something to racist asshats versus Black people and people of color, because it's dangerous sometimes. And also, like, it is just safer for you to say something than to shut up and not say anything at all. Whether you can take them aside privately and say something to them, and however you'd like to say it in a really nice way, or whatever, or not, because when you say something offensive, get ready for a clapback. But I appreciate you saying that, Rebecca. I think we should all be mad and pissed off, and enough is enough.
So
I completely agree. I'm sorry, Jennifer.
Oh, it's
sorry.
okay. It's okay.
I can also, if nobody else has anything, because I've definitely spoken, but I can share an experience that we had at a venue that we did. If nobody else, is there anybody else, Jennifer, that you can see that has something, just to speak to Rebecca's point?
No, go for it.
So I'm not going to mention a venue because I don't want to do that, but we did have an experience at a venue where my entire staff came back and reported to me that they were spoken to in ways that made them uncomfortable, were racist, just things that not okay to us as a company, not okay to any human being. And something that I like to work with my staff about is a 24-hour rule. So if there are things that go wrong at an event, and there always are, or, experiences that happen, let's reconvene in 24 hours when, we're less tired, we're less drained, and we can talk about things appropriately. So I always say 24-hour rule, let's talk about it the next day. And everybody was still as upset as they should have been. And I was upset, and our owner was upset, and we called the venue manager, and what I said to them is, help me understand why some of these comments were made. And instead of going at them and attacking, it was coming to them in a way of like, just help me understand where your head was at. Help me understand why you thought it was okay to say some of those things. And I heard every excuse in the book. There was no like ownership about it was wrong. It was like, I was tired, I didn't feel well, but no, like, I'm sorry, and that was wrong, and I shouldn't have said any of those things. It was more of an excuse, but it opened the door to a conversation. So I think that I think it was Anna that earlier said, or I think it was Anna that earlier said, if there's, a conversation to be had, then you might give somebody a second chance. If there's a denial or rage or whatever it is, the door's kind of shut. And we said after that, our employees are important to us. They're a part of our family. We work with them all the time. And if they can't be treated in a way that we expect them to be treated, we can't work here. And that was it. That was the end of it. But I think it's important to open the door with a question, and be willing to have a conversation before there's an attack. Because what we've all learned is that some people truly don't understand, and some people are trying to take those first steps towards, rethinking things, like Laura started out saying, like, examining. But if people aren't willing to have that conversation, then maybe our business doesn't belong there. For us, that's a deal, closed door buy. But so I hope that was helpful to you, Rebecca. Just like, help me understand is always a great way to start a conversation.
Yeah, and I, as Jennifer and a couple of others of, I'm a little bit of a hothead. And so when I see something, like, I tend to go in full guns blazing and then back off later. And sometimes it's too late. So, like, your help me understand is actually super helpful, and something that I can kind of, like, try to implant in my brain, to not be like, why are you such a dick? But rather, help me understand why you're such a dick is maybe a little nicer. I'm teasing.
Well,
I'm sorry, Jennifer, but Dora, you mentioned, like, an attack. Like, a lot of times people feel attacked. I think, like, we really need to recognize that when you call someone out, it's not an attack. It's just not, Black people are literally being attacked and murdered. So,
right.
Like, telling someone, like, hey, this was racist, and them feeling attacked or feeling defensive or feeling that white fragility, like, whatever, like, that's just what you're going to come across every time you call someone out. It's just what happens. It's, if you're not in tune with, the anti-racist movement, then you're going to react in such ways. So I think if someone comes at you saying, like, oh, I'm feeling attacked or whatever, just don't like feed into that by, like, saying I'm attacking you, or, like, I don't want you to feel attacked, because, like, it's, words matter. They're impactful, they're important. And, whether someone feels attacked and whether they actually are attacked, those are two different things. That was it.
That's a really good point, Daniela.
So, okay, so a few things that we can do that are good takeaways from today. I'd love as many of you who could answer this question in the chat. What can you commit to today? Is there something that you're not already doing that you can commit to doing moving forward? Is there something that is an actionable step that is, real and hard steps forward that will lead us into, a more diverse and equitable sharing of, the diversity that is amongst us? I don't know. I mean, I guess, for me, it's like, I see beauty, and, like, I talked a little bit about this, but I see so much beauty in diversity. I see it in, the various voices that I get to listen to and hear from, and I think that enriches my own life. And I know a lot of people are saying that, but the truth is that I believe it. I believe it's true, and so my answer, what can you commit to today? Well, certainly, I mean, something that is ongoing is, if there's ever a networking event that I feel that is not inclusive enough, I have spoken up. If there's, I'm not really sure, I'm not really clear on how, again, kind of going back to my earlier statement about, publications and what we as an industry hold up as beautiful is really still something that I'd love some more clarity around. So reading maybe some more about that, but that's kind of where I am. And does anyone have any last things that they want to say or share? Or I just don't want to keep everyone for too long.
This is more tangible, and I'm not going to say I came up with this idea. I was in the conversation with Aaron. Aaron and Steve from Sock Vision. It's a videography vendor in the DC area, DMV area. Wonderful. SOK Vision. Look them up. So they're an interracial couple, Korean American and a Black woman, just amazing, amazing small group dialogue, and something that because it's one of those conversations being like, what can I do? And it's like so annoying, I think, for a lot of Black people being like, stop asking me what you can do. But like the feedback I did receive is something like really taking the steps to be the convener. I think as a venue, it is something that I want to do as soon as we get to this normal state of being able to gather. I have the capacity and capability to open up the facility and really be a location where we can plan events that are inclusive. And it's not some of those things where I'm going to plan it. I think utilizing the vendors and connecting the community, because there's not a lot of opportunities. We all know there's hotels that host these like vendor luncheons, and from the photos we know what that looks like. It's the same vendors, same photographers, all at the same table. So I certainly want it to be more, not like, oh, let's go eat and chat and have like a lunch. I want it to be more of a panel discussion. We have a beautiful theater, and I do want to open that up for conversations, sure, networking and drinking, all the fun stuff, but something more tangible where we like, it's going to continue what we're dealing with now and discussing into like actual progress. So feel free to, I love that these calls are being recorded because I think there's a sense of accountability. So I certainly would love to connect with anyone on this call who has ideas and would want to take advantage of that, partner with that. So for 2021, once we have a vaccine.
The videographer you were talking about?
Pardon me?
The name
Didn't
of
you mention at first a videographer?
Yeah, it's SOK Vision.
Got it.
Sock Vision, Aaron and Steve. Stunning.
Awesome. Okay, well, if anyone on this call is interested in, either coming up with an idea for our next step, next discussion, please reach out to me. I'd love to hear from you. That's the first thing. The second thing is that I do have a couple other really interesting discussions that I'm planning up in the next couple months. Not related to diversity, but more related to dealing with, and the word is going to escape me. What is the word? Resilience. Sorry, I was thinking reactivity. Resilience, something that is, I mean, how are we dealing with things? How are our businesses dealing with things? I don't know how many of you listen to How I Built This by Guy Raz, but he does a resiliency podcast, and I find it really interesting. And I'd love to just hear from businesses, people who are, really struggling during this time, and kind of what it's been like for you. So I have a couple of interviews set up, and I'm going to try to keep those to in half an hour so that it doesn't take too much of your time. So thank you so much, everyone. I really appreciate you being here, and I look forward to having more discussions. Stay tuned. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.